Hello friends, welcome to the new series of state management course. In these tutorials you will learn Cubit Streams and Providers. Also you will be able to use them for other projects. In this video we will start with Cubit Setup, and at the end we will build this counter app using Cubit. So let's get started. Now we will start with our application. First of all, I have created new counter application, as you can see here. So if you don't know how to create a new project, you can basically go to the View tab right over here, and there is a command palette, or you can use shortcut, which is Ctrl-Shift-P. So when you select this, you just need to type Flutter, and all the options which is related to Flutter will come to this section. So from here, if you want to create a new project, basically click to this new project. From here, click to the application, and then it will ask where you want to locate your application. So I want to locate it to the desktop. Just select the folder right over here. Then it will ask which name you want to give to your application. I'm just going to say counter application, as you can see. So I already created this application, so I don't need to create it again. After you create this application successfully, you will get all these files which is automatically generated by Flutter. And we will mainly work on this lib folder. And as you can see, there is main dot, which is inside of this lib folder. Before I explain the codes here, I will actually delete the comments. And now let's see what's going on here. First of all, we have a main function which will build our entire application. Inside of this run app, there is my app, which is stateless widget. And inside of the my app, there is material app, which is returned. And then there is a title for our application. There is some theme setup. And also there is home, which is my homepage widget. Inside of my homepage widget, as you can see, it is stateful widget. There is a title which we are accepting from the constructor. Here, this is the title for our homepage. And then here, as you can see, there is counter value. So this counter value is this one. Okay, it is used inside of text widget. And then we have a method which will increase our counter. Then we have a build method. And inside of build, we are returning scaffold. Inside of scaffold, there is a basic app bar with this title, and then we have a body. So we will work on this body. Here you can see there is a centered column, and inside of the column there is two texts. So the first text, as you can see here, and the second text. So all the content is centered, as you can see, with the help of the center and help of this main axis alignment. Inside of the second text, we are using counter value, as you can see. And then we have floating action button, which is this one. From this floating action button, we are calling increment counter function. So this function is increasing the counter value. So set state is used for this application, but we will not going to use set state. So let me give you advice. Here we are using stateful widget, which is not good for the applications. So if you can avoid stateful widget, that is awesome. Here we will actually delete the set state. So this set state is used for rebuilding entire scaffold. Okay, so this is the one approach for the state management, but it is not recommended. So I will actually delete the increment method. I will delete the counter. We don't need it right now because we will use block provider. And then we can convert this stateful widget to the stateless widget, as you can see. And lastly, there is errors. I will delete this function because we have deleted that. And instead of this, I will use this one. Okay. So when we create the block provider, I'm going to use the method which we define inside of the Cubit. And also I will delete the counter because we don't need it right now. Also, let's delete tooltip because it is not important right now. Now, because we deleted set state, our screen will be static. So when I click the float in action button, as you can see, nothing is changing in the screen. That's why we are going to use Cubit for making our screen reactive. Now, for using Cubit, we need to install some package and also some extensions, which is important. Let's install block extension, which is important for us. Now I will type block here, and you can select this extension, then just install it. Secondly, we need to install Flutter block. So go to the pub/dev, just type Flutter block. And then you will see this package. Just click on it. And here there is some tabs. We need to go for installing. And inside of installing, there is some code which we need to place inside the pub/spec YAML. So go to the VS Code again. And inside of pub/spec YAML, just scroll down. And under the dependencies, we can simply paste this code under these Cupertino icons. For using the Cubit in our application, we can create a folder inside of lib folder. So new folder, and let's name it Cubits. Okay, it is not necessary, but I recommend using Cubits inside of lib function because we may have more than one Cubits which we are using for our application. So that's why I created this folder. And then click to the Cubits, scroll down, and here you will see Cubit, new Cubit. Just click on it. Then it will ask you the name for the Cubit. We will say counter Cubit. Okay, or maybe we can use underscore Cubit like that. You will see that inside of Cubits folder, some documents is created. Okay, that is happening because we installed block extension. Then we can name our Cubit just like this. Rename, and I will rename it like this, Cubit counter Cubit. Let's look at the counter Cubit state firstly. Inside of this document, there is two classes which is created automatically. The first one is abstract class counter Cubit state, and the second one is counter Cubit initial, which extends counter Cubit state. This counter Cubit initial is the first state for our application. Initial state means there is no data yet, so we are not going to provide anything for our UI. So then we can create how many states we want. Firstly, I will create Cubit loading. Then we can use counter Cubit success. And lastly, we can use counter Cubit error. This Cubit loading means our data is loading right now, and we will provide them after, for example, 2 seconds, maybe 5 seconds. Counter Cubit success means our data is ready, and now we will provide it to our user interface. And the counter Cubit error means there is a problem with loading our data. So we can use this information. We can add some dialogue in our screen and let the user know that there is some issue while loading our data. And here, why we are extending this counter Cubit state. So you will understand this well if we move to the next folder, which is counter Cubit Cubit, actually the naming is not good enough. Maybe I can rename this one like this, counter Cubit. Okay, just hit OK. And then here I can just say counter, sorry, not for that, for this one. I can simply say counter state. So this naming is just up to you. You can name it whatever you want. And also here, I'm going to change this like this, counter initial, counter loading, counter success, and counter error, just like this. Also, let me change this counter Cubit state. So we need to replace this counter Cubit state in everywhere. And as you can see, there is no error, but we have some errors in this counter Cubit. So this error occurs because this counter state is changed. So let me put this here, and also counter initial is changed. I will put this here. Now there is no issue. So we need to fix this imports. I will delete this one. And inside of counter state, we need to import this immutable from foundation.dart. And this error is gone. Also for the package, I'm not going to use block. Instead, I will use Flutter block. And also for this part, I will say Flutter block. And as you can see, there is no any issue for our application. Now let me explain this counter Cubit.dart file. Here, as you can see, there is counter Cubit class. I will also rename it just like this, counter Cubit. Also, I will rename this just like this. Inside of this, we are extending Cubit because we need to use Cubit features. That's why we are extending this Cubit class. And inside of this Cubit, we just need to define which states we are going to use, okay? And here we are using counter state. And counter state was the abstract class, which we are extending in all the states. But why we are extending this? Because as a state, if I come here and use counter initial, there is no error. In this case, counter loading will not be used. Also, counter success, counter error will not be recognized by Cubit. That's why we are creating abstract class and we are using this as our state. And then Cubit will understand that we want to use counter initial, counter loading, success, and error because all these classes extending counter state. And when we use counter state as the state of our Cubit, basically we will be able to use all of them. These states are very important if you are fetching some data from third-party systems. So if you are using RESTful, in this case, you need to send some request to the third-party systems, and then you will get a response. Inside of response, you will get the data which you need. But in our case, we are not getting anything from third-party systems. So that's why these states are meaningless. We are not going to load any data. We will just have a state value which is 0. So when we click the float in action button, this state will be increased. So that's going to be 1. Maybe then it will be 2, 3, 4, just like this. That means we can just delete the counter state. So I will delete this counter state. And automatically, this counter Cubit.dart file will give the errors. First of all, it will say, which state are you using? Okay, that's the first error. We have deleted counter state, that's why we are getting error. Secondly, it is asking, what is the initial state? We are using counter initial, but we have deleted this. Now, I will do some changes here. First of all, I will delete this import from here. Also, I will delete this import from here. And inside of the Cubit, I will say we will be using integer as our state. because the value which is inside of this text will be integer. That's why we are saying that we will only listen to the changes for this integer value. And inside of the counter qubit, we can put some initial state. And as an initial, I will say I am using 0 as my state value. Now I can start to create method which will increase the state whenever I click to this floating action button. So here I will define a regular function. I will say void increase state. So whenever this function is called, we will emit a state and we will say state plus 1. So what does it mean? This function will be called, means this floating action button will be clicked. And we will emit a new state. Basically, we will provide a new value, which is 0, which is initial, plus 1. If we click the floating action button second time, what is going to happen? This function will be called, and our state is 1 because we already increased that. The value will be 2 because the current value for the state was 1. And now let's use this qubit. First of all, we need to use block provider to let Flutter know that we are providing values. And secondly, we need to choose in which screen or in which widget we want to provide this value. In our case, we need to provide this value for this widget, which is my homepage. Okay, so what we can do, we can wrap this my homepage with block provider. So which is here, wrap with block provider. Secondly, we need to specify what types of qubit we are using. Okay, so as a default, this is using block, but we need to change it and we need to use counter qubit. So just import it. Why we are using counter qubit? Because we are going to use this counter qubit class, because the function which is defined is inside of this counter qubit. Then we need to import this block provider as well. Okay, and the invalid constant value, we need to delete this constant. Also, let's use constant for the my homepage, and that's all. Now our application knows that using counter qubit, we will provide some value. We will emit some states. Secondly, we need to choose in which section we are going to provide the value. So for this text widget, we need to provide the value. That's why we can wrap this text widget with block consumer, and then we need to define the qubit. Here I will say, sorry, here it will be counter, and the first one is the qubit. I will say we are going to use counter qubit, and the second one is the state, basically the value which we wanna provide. So the value is integer, that's why we need to put integer for the state. For the block consumer, there is two parameters, so listener and the builder. Builder is the one which will build text widget whenever the state is changed. Okay, so when state will change, when this function is called, because we are emitting new state. So when new state is emitted, automatically text that we wrapped inside the block consumer or block builder automatically rebuilt. And as a value for this text, I'm going to use state value. State value is integer, so if I try state here, it is going to give the error because we need to use string. So what I can do, I can use $sign inside of the quotes, and as you can see, there is no any error. We have listener. Right now, we are not using this, but let's check if it is working, and then we will come back to this listener property. And lastly, we need to call this method, because if we don't call this method, otherwise new state will not be emitted and our UI will not listen to the changes. So inside the floating action button, we can call the method which is inside of the Cubit. This is the singleton for our Cubit, and from this we can actually call increase state method. And now let's check if it is working or not. I will restart my application. Let's click to this floating action button. So let's go back to the listener right over here. And as I said, this one is going to listen to the state, okay? That one is not going to build anything in our widget tray. So using this listener, we can show dialog, maybe we can print something. Actually, let me print here something. First of all, I will check the state value, and I'm going to say, if the state value is greater than 5, and let's say state is greater than 5, okay? Now, I will click to the floating action button, and also let me open debug console so you can see printed result. So click to that, and again, I'm going to click to that. And as you can see, state is greater than 5 because this listener is listening to the state value. So the state value is integer. That's going to listen to the integer, which is starting from 0. And when it is greater than 5, it is going to print state is greater than 5. Before I explain the streams, I would like to explain reactive programming, because if you understand reactive programming, it is going to be a lot easier to understand streams and stream builder. Currently, this application is static. As you can see, nothing is changing. If I click to this floating action button, also nothing is changing, because the values that we are providing are static. If I create an integer value, so that's going to be counter and equals to 0. And I will be using this inside of the text. And just because it is a variable, I have to use $sign before that. Okay. And then when we click to this floating action button, I would like to increase the counter value. And now if I refresh and just click to this floating action button, nothing is changing. Why is that happening? Actually, in the background, counter value is changing. If I print the counter value, you will see that the value is changing, but we don't see any effect in our screen because it is a static screen. So if I click to this floating action button, but first of all, let me expand this window and click to this. Again, I will click and the value is changing. But why we don't see it in the screen? Because we need reactive programming. That's why state management tools such as Block, Cubit, Streams, so these tools are very important. So let's imagine streams like this. Let's imagine that here we have a stream and the streams are working like this. We have to load data to the stream and the streams are continuously flowing. So whenever we load a new data, it is going to provide it to the listener. Listener is a widget, for example, that is listening to the stream. And whenever I load data, for example, if I click to this floating action button, I will load a data to this stream, and the stream is continuously flowing, and it is going to provide it to this widget. And that is the reactive programming. And for reactive programming, we can use stream controller, which is very important here. So the stream controller, as name indicates, it is just controlling our stream. We can always check the status of the stream. For example, I am loading the data, so I can check if this data arrived to the stream or not. So let's practice this, and I think if you practice, you will understand it better. So firstly, I would like to convert my homepage to stateful widget. And I'm going to tell you why we are doing this. So convert to stateful widget. And then here we have a counter value. I would like to move this counter to inside of the state class. I think this part. And inside of the state class, also I would like to create stream controller. And then again, I will say stream controller. And again, I will say stream controller. And that's it. Our stream controller is created. And then we have to decide what types of data we are loading to the stream. And in our case, we have to load integer value. That's why after this stream controller, I'm just going to say integer. And also after this stream controller, I have to say I'm going to load integer to my stream. When you create the controllers, you have to close them. That's very important for the application, because if you don't close the controllers after you use them, that's going to lower the performance of your application. That's why in the stateful widget, there is a lifecycle method which is named dispose. And inside of this, we can close all the controllers that we have. And here I will just say stream controller dot close. So as a next step, what we can do, we can load some data to this stream. And we can load it inside of the floating action button. Here we are increasing the counter value. So the value of counter is 0. And we are increasing this. After we increase the value, what we can do, we can take our stream controller, and then we can use sync and then add. So what is the sync right over here? Sync basically is the place that we are adding or loading our data. And then we are adding this value, so it is going to be counter, to this sync. So we don't need to print anything because we are going to see result in the screen. And finally, we have to build text widget using Stream Builder. I will wrap this text widget with Stream Builder, and it will ask me what type of data you are going to load here, what type of data this text widget will listen to. So we are saying that we are going to load integer. Then we have a stream. So it is null currently, but what we can do, we can use this stream controller. And inside of the stream controller, there is a stream. So we can place it here, and there is no any problem right now. So we have a builder, and inside of the builder, we are building text widget, okay? And this text widget is using counter as a value, but that shouldn't be happened, because if we use counter, again, our screen will be static. To make it reactive, we have to use snapshot, because the snapshot is listening to the changes in the stream. So basically, we can take this snapshot, just like this, then dot data. Currently, there is an issue, because if we are using statements like this, we have to wrap this with curly braces. Now, there is no any issue. So I will test my application. I will restart it. So currently, we are getting null as a stream value. That is happening because if we don't click to this floating action button, value will not be loaded. And as a default, inside of stream, there is no any data. Okay, that's why snapshot is the null as a default. So what we can do, One of the ways is using initial data. And here we can say, before loading the data, I want to see 0 in the screen. So let's restart application. And as you can see, we are getting 0. And if I click to this floating action button, value is changing. So I am clicking, again, it is changing. And that's going to increase every time I click to this floating action button. Inside of this onPressed, we are increasing the value of counter, and then we are loading this to the stream controller. That's why every time I click to this floating action button, this increased value will be loaded to the stream, and the stream automatically will provide it to the listener, which is text widget. Now I would like to change the behavior of the screen. And let me restart the application. And when I click to this floating action button, I want to see this text widget value is increasing. Okay, maybe in every 1 second or in every 300 milliseconds, I want to see that actually the value is changing continuously. So that can be achieved by streams. I'm not going to use the counter value here. I will just delete it. And I will also delete this part. I will use the for loop for this scenario. And I want to start from 0. That's why I put 0 here. And I want to go till 11. So from 0 till 11, I want to see the value is changing. It is increased when I click to this floating action button. And here, again, I can use my stream controller. I can say sync because I'm going to add load data and add method. Here I will use value of I. Here, just use this one. Then let's see what's going to happen. I will click to this one, and automatically it is getting the last value. So why we don't see values till this 10? So that's happening because this process is working synchronously. If we want to see some delay before adding each value, we have to convert this function to a synchronous function. And for doing that, we have to use async keyword in our method. And after I load each data, I can use future delayed. And here there is a duration. And as a duration, I will use milliseconds, and 300 milliseconds will be enough for us. And also for the duration, I will say constant. So if I try this again, I will get 10. So that's happening because that is a future method. And if I don't use await before that, this loading process will not wait for 300 seconds or milliseconds. So that's why I am using await before the delayed function, and I'm going to restart my application. So let's click to this floating action button. As you can see, we are not doing anything, just clicking once to this floating action button. And because there is a for loop which starts from 0 until 11, continuously we are providing the values to the stream, and we are using some delay before adding each value. That's why the stream will get the data and send it to the widget. Then it is going to wait for 300 milliseconds. Then it is going to load next data. It will wait again. Then it will load next data, provide it to the widget. Then it will wait, and that way it will provide the values. Currently, we are listening to this stream from one place. So this place is this text widget. So is there any ways that we can listen one stream, a single stream, from several listeners, from several parts? So that's possible. For example, from where we can listen to this stream? We can listen to it from the actions of the app bar. Here I can create actions, and here I will use icon button. Inside of it, there is on press, and there is icon. I'm going to use some random icon here. Let's say save. So also let's use constant here. Now in the on pressed, I want to listen to this stream controller. How can I do it? I can use stream controller again, and there is a stream here, as you remember, stream. And for the stream, there is some methods. One of them is listen. This listen method is listening to the values that we load to this stream. And actually this event is the values that we provide. So every time I provide or load new data, this onPress function will listen to it. Or let's say this line of code will listen to it. And here I just want to print this event, and I want to see what is actually happening in the stream controller. Here, new icon is added to the app bar, and when I click to it, it will start listen. So I am clicking to this, but before, let me expand this window so you can see results. Currently, here, values is changing. Means we are loading data and stream is passing these values to this text widget. But we don't see anything in the debug console because we are not clicking to these actions. So that's very logical because that is only listen if we press to this icon button. So refresh again. And I'm clicking to this floating action button, and immediately I will click to this app bar action. Okay, so click to that and click to this. Very important, we are getting this error. We are getting this error, and it says stream has already been listened to. So this way of defining the stream controller is not going to provide us to listen from several points or several pages, several parts of application. So in order to listen from several points, we have to use broadcast constructor. Now let's restart the application. I'm clicking to this floating action button, and immediately I will go to this action. So click to that and also click to this. As you can see, it starts from the 4. Why it is starting from 4? Because when I click to this button, I was loading 4. And till 4 values is not recognized because this action is actually listened to the stream from this value. So if I click to this action very quickly, maybe I will see 3 or maybe 2. So let's try it quickly. So we are still in the same application that we have created recently. I deleted all the codes related to stream controller, and as you can see, there is no anything about stream controller. We only have stream builder, which will provide the value for this text widget. Now we will create a stream with different approach, and we will put it inside of this stream property. For creating the stream, I will come here inside of my homepage state, and I will create a method which will return stream. Here I will just say stream of integer. So we will add integers inside of this stream again, and the method name is going to be getNumbers. Inside of this getNumbers, we will add a new values to this stream. We are just going to say yield 20. So this yield keyword is very important for returning a stream. When we say yield, that basically means we want to add this value inside of this stream. Currently, this yield keyword is not recognized by Dart because in order to use this yield keyword, we have to define our method in a different way. We need to use async asterisk, and in this case, as you can see, this yield keyword is recognized. If you are returning value from the method, which is stream, you have to use async asterisk. Otherwise, you cannot use it. For getting this stream, we just need to call this method. We can call this method inside of this stream builder, and here, instead of null, I will say get numbers. And as you can see, currently we are not getting error because when we call get numbers, it returns stream of integer, and this stream builder is waiting for stream of integer. That's why we are not getting any error. Lastly, we need to use this snapshot, otherwise we cannot get the data. So inside of this text, I'm just going to use snapshot.data, and I will wrap this snapshot data inside of curly braces. So if I open my application, we will get 20 inside of this text because we yield 20 from this stream, and then we are getting this inside of this stream builder. Now, I want to put some delay before getting this data. Here, inside of the get numbers, I will use feature.delayed, and I will put some duration. I will say seconds and maybe 2 seconds. Also, let me use constant here. And also, I have to use await because this delayed method is a feature method. And now I will restart my application, and let's see what's going to happen. Firstly, we are getting null, and after 2 seconds, we are getting 20 because we put some delay before this 20. But issue in this application is we are getting null, and that's not good for user experience. In order to not get this null, we have to use some stream builder feature. Why we are getting null? Because stream builder is trying to get value from the stream, and because we put some delay before this 20, stream builder uses null value for 2 seconds. Inside of builder, we can use some properties of snapshot. Inside of the if, I will use snapshot, and inside of snapshot, there is has data. So this means if there is data inside of this snapshot, we will do some operations, okay? Maybe we will return some widget. In this case, I will just return circular progress indicator. Till we get data, we will see circular progress indicator in our screen. So let's restart our application, and we are getting circular progress indicator. And after 2 seconds, we are getting 20. Additionally, we can use another check for this if condition. We can say if there is no data, or if snapshot.connection state equals to connection state dot waiting. So here that means if data is loading, in this case we want to use circular progress indicator. And if I restart my application, I will get same result. What if there is some error for this stream that we are getting from this function? In order to get error from this stream, we have to put something that will cause an error. And for that, I will delete this feature delayed, create a variable, and I will say integer num equals 10 divided by 0. So this num is going to cause an issue because we cannot divide by 0. And here we are getting error because it says the result of this expression is a double, so we cannot assign it to the integer. What I can do, I can cast this double to int. And as you can see, we are not getting any error. And here I will just yield this num. And if I open my application, I will see that continuously we are getting circular progress indicator. That's happening because inside of Builder, we are checking if there is no data or if the connection state is waiting, return circular progress indicator. And here, this stream builder is not getting any data because there is an error inside of this method. That's why this method is not going to yield anything, and here stream builder will get null. That's why we are getting circular progress indicator. How can we handle this? Inside of this builder, I can say if snapshot dot has error. In this case, I just want to return a text widget, and inside of this text widget, I will say something went wrong. So let's see what's going to happen. And before, let me use constant here. And as you can see, we are getting something went wrong. That's happening because we have error. And first of all, Stream Builder will check this condition. Just because we have error, it will return this text widget. These conditions are very important. If you are working with Firebase, for example, you may see some methods that Firebase provides. For example, snapshots. When you create some documents in the Firestore, you may want to get snapshots. And this snapshots is a method which returns a stream. So you will call these snapshots and put it inside of the stream. And if there is some error or if there is no data, that's how you will handle. Okay, that was all about this tutorial. In the next series, we will start with providers. See you in there. In this tutorial, we will talk about one of the most popular state management tool, which is Provider. Let's get started. First of all, in order to use Provider, we should install the package. And for installing, we can go to the View, and from here select Command Palette, and here just type dart add dependency. From here, you can select the package that you want to install, or you can just simply search. And as you can see, we are getting this provider. Click to it, got dependencies. And if you go to the pubspec YAML, we will see that provider package is installed. Before starting to explain how should we use provider, I would like to make some changes to our application. Currently, as you see, all the codes is located inside of main Dart. As your project gets bigger, you cannot write all the codes inside of one document. What can you do? You can get some codes and place them inside of separate files. In this case, your code will be clean and easy to optimize. So what can we do? Here we have a class, which is my app. So I can take this, just cut it from here. I will create a new file inside of lib folder, which is named app.dart, and just place this code inside of this file. Then we should import the material Dart, and also we have to import my home page. After that, you will get some error because it says my app is not recognized. There is no any class inside of this main Dart. That's why we have to import it from app.dart because the code is inside of this document. Then also we can get this my home page, place it inside of separate file. So I will cut this code from here. Then I will create a folder. Let's name it screens. And inside of the screens folder, I will create a file which is named my homepage .dart. Okay, then place the code inside of this file, import stateless widget from material Dart, then there is no any error. But inside of the app Dart, we are getting error because we get the code from the main Dart, place it inside of my homepage. That's why it says that this import is useless right now. We will import this my homepage from my homepage.dart file. Now, as you can see inside of the main Dart, we have very short code, and then our homepage is inside of this file, and our material app is inside of app.dart. Now we can start to use provider. For using provider, I will create a class which is essential to provide the values. And this class should be located inside of provider folder. Inside of the lib folder, I will create providers folder, and I will place all the providers that I have for this application inside of this folder. Then inside of providers folder, I will create counter provider.dart file. Then I will just create a class which is named counter provider. Then I will place all the variables that I will provide to my application. First of all, I need a counter value, which is going to be 0, and the type of it is integer. Then we have to create a method which will increase value of the counter. So void increase counter. And here I'm just going to say counter plus plus. So that is going to change the value of counter. But the problem here is currently we are not using the provider. And if I get this counter and place it inside of my home page, inside of this text widget, and if I call this increase counter method from the floating action button, nothing is going to change in the screen. Basically, again, our screen will be static. In order to make it reactive, we have to do some changes in this class. Basically, we need to use provider. First of all, we have to use change notifier for this counter provider. I will say with change notifier. So why we are using this change notifier, which is a mixin? Because there is a method inside of change notifier that we need. And this method is notify listeners. After we increase the value, we just need to use notify listener method. And when we are using this, that basically means we want to notify all the listeners. Because the value is changed, we have to say that, well, we have changed the counter value, just listen to it. Then after this setup is done with this class, we can go to the app.dart file and we can provide our class, which is counter provider. So here we have a my home page. And as you know, inside of the home page, there is a text widget which we want to change. And here we have to provide this counter provider class to this my home page, because inside of the my home page, we have a text widget. So here we are getting error because we have to restart application. So error is gone. And here we have to provide value for this text widget. That's why over this my home page, we have to provide our class. Here, I'm just going to use change notifier provider. So this is something that comes from provider package. That's why it's important to install it. Then after this change notifier provider, we have to put all the required fields. Here, as you see, we have a create method, which is required. That's why I have to create something inside of change notify provider. Automatically Dart provides me some codes. For example, I'm going to use this one. This is the function that gets context, and using this context, it is providing some value for the child object, which is my home page. I will return my class, which is counter provider, because all the values that we want to provide is inside of this class. Here, I will return counter provider. I have to import it. And as you see, there is no any issue. Again, this create property is used for providing values from the class. And that class should use the change notifier. Otherwise, it is not going to provide anything for the child object, which is here. And the child object is the listener, which is listening to this counter provider class. So we can go to my home page, or from these files, we can go to this document, and here we can create the instance of the provider. To create the instance is very important because we will get function from there. And here we have the increase counter function, which we need inside of my home page. Inside of the build, which is recommended, we have to create the instance of provider. And we can create it using provider dot. So first of all, we have to import it from the provider package dot auth. Then inside of this method, we have to use context, and that's it. So that context is this context. Additionally, for this code, we have to specify which provider we will be using. And after this auth, we can specify it. It says counter provider. Okay, now there is no any issue. And if I come here and press dot, you will see that we are getting counter. And also, if I type increase, we are getting the increase counter method from this instance. I will store this instance inside of a variable. So final provider equals to this one. Where should we using this provider? First of all, we have to use it inside of this text. And secondly, we have to use it for this floating action button. For the text, we can get counter value, which is inside of this class. We can say provider dot counter. We can wrap it with the curly braces, and before this curly braces, we can use $sign. That is string interpolation. We have to call the method which is inside of counter provider, and we can call it from the floating action button on press property. Here, I will say provider dot increase counter, and that will be all about using provider. In this case, this text widget will be reactive, which means it will listen to this counter value because we are using this mixin, which is change notifier, and every time this counter value changes, we are notifying the listeners. And the listener is my home page because here inside of the app Dart, we are providing this counter provider and using this child, which is listener. So if I restart my application and if I click to this floating action button, as you can see, this text widget is a reactive widget right now. Inside of this instance, there is an additional property which is listen. So why should we using this listen property? For example, if I say true, that means we are listening right now. And if I say false, that means we don't want to listen anything that comes from this provider. So when that can be useful, let's say there is some value that is inside of this counter provider I want to use inside of my home page, but I don't want to listen to the changes, which means I am using something from this provider, but I'm not interested in the changes. Basically, I'm saying that if any value changes inside of this counter provider, don't let me know I'm not listening. So if I hot restart and go to my application, and if I click to this floating action button, nothing is changing, but we are getting this 0 from this counter provider. But if I make this listen true, that basically means we want to listen to the changes. And if I click to it, as you see, we are listening. If you want to use simpler syntax for creating the instance of provider, you can use context.read, and here you can specify the provider which we will be using, which is counter provider, and then use parentheses. That is one of the syntaxes that you can use for creating the instance of your provider. And if I restart my application and click to this floating action button, as you see, nothing is changing in our screen. That's happening because we are using read right now. And read means we don't want to listen. Basically, this one is the same with this one, provider of counter provider context and listen to false. This syntax is the same one with this one. If we want to listen, which means listen should be true, what can we do? We can use watch. Watch is something also can be used if we want to listen to this provider. Okay, that one is the same syntax with that one. If I hot restart my application, and if I click to this floating action button, as you see, again, our text widget is reactive.